Good morning. Welcome to First Christian Church. We are so glad to see all of you in the room. Want to give a shout out to the Himmer family today who are watching from the great state of Alaska and all the rest of our online church family. We are so glad you are here too. This is week number 2 of a sermon series called How to Improve Your Marriage Without Saying a Word. Now, is that even possible? Yes, it is. In fact, I believe some marriages represented here today could be better before the sun goes down tonight if they're willing to do things God's way. But I want to begin the message with a story about a couple who had been married for 25 years, and they weren't fighting all the time. They weren't yelling at each other every night. They weren't throwing plates or threatening divorce or anything crazy like that. But they really weren't connecting either, and they had drifted into what a lot of marriages become over time, which is essentially a functional partnership. They managed schedules, they paid bills, they lived in the same house, they got things done, but the closeness they once enjoyed was mostly gone. Frustrated, the husband shared with his pastor, he said, I don't think my wife and I are getting any closer as we get older. Like, big conversations always turn into disagreements, and we pretty much stopped talking about anything really important. And so his pastor gave him a challenge. He said, for the next 30 days, don't try to fix your wife. Don't try to win an argument. Don't try to force a big relationship talk. Just serve her every day in some practical way. And so he started small. He got up 10 minutes early and he made her coffee before she woke up and went to work. He filled her gas tank when he was out driving her car. He folded laundry without being asked. He left little notes on the bathroom mirror that said things like, praying for you today, or hope your meeting goes well. And there were no speeches, no lectures, no dramatic conversations, just practical actions. And within a few weeks, the unexpected began to happen. His wife started changing things too. She started sitting beside him instead of across the room from him. She started asking him about his day and really listening to his answers and putting down her phone when he was talking. And then one evening he came home to find his favorite meal on the table. And another day she surprised him with tickets to a basketball game. And eventually she said, can I ask you something? Why have you been doing all these things for me lately? And he smiled and he said, I realized I've spent years telling you what I needed from you, but not enough time showing you what you mean to me. Years later, as they told their story at a marriage conference, the wife said, the turning point in our marriage wasn't a conversation. It was a series of actions. My husband started loving me in ways I could see before talking about it. And somehow his actions said more than his words ever could. Now that's what this series is all about. 1 John chapter 3, verse 18 says, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. Some of the most powerful ways we communicate are unspoken. Respect can be shown without speech. Love can be demonstrated without words. Kindness, sacrifice, patience, service. Sometimes the loudest message in a marriage is the one offered without saying a single word. Now, as I said last week, I didn't write this series. I'm borrowing it with permission from a pastor friend in Texas, and I'm adapting it for our church. And my prayer is that it will be as helpful for you as it's been for me. And we began last week by acknowledging the fact that men and women are what? Men and women are different. That's right. Now, not everybody likes that fact, and not everybody agrees with that fact, but disagreement doesn't make it untrue. Men and women are different. And because men and women are different, we often approach things differently. And yes, I'm speaking in general here. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, our differences hold true. And when we're dating, it seems to work out okay. In fact, we could say it like this: when dating, opposites attract. When married, opposites attack. How many of you know what I'm talking about? It's because we're different. But God made us different for a reason. Genesis 1:27 says, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. We're made in the image of God, but we're made differently on purpose. We're made differently to express different parts of God's nature. Men and women, they have equal dignity and worth and equal value before God, but we're different. Let's review a little more, because last week we built on the foundation, this whole series around this idea of love and respect. In Ephesians 5:33, the Apostle Paul writes, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself. And the wife must respect her husband. Love and respect. Now, to illustrate what happens when a wife does not feel loved by her husband and when a husband does not feel respected by his wife, we came up with two equations. For her, distance feels like a lack of love. And a lack of love leads to fear. And fear leads to complaining. How many of you remember that from last week? And for him, a lack of respect leads to shame. And shame leads to defensiveness. And defensiveness leads to withdrawal. And when you take these two equations and you put them together, you've got a destructive cycle. She feels unloved, so she complains. He hears disrespect, so he withdraws. She experiences withdrawal as distance, so she complains more. He experiences complaining as more disrespect, so he withdraws more. Round and round we go. Brief moment of really honesty here. Last Sunday afternoon, right after preaching about how talking doesn't change things, only changing things changes things, I went home and I started a talk with Janice that was unhelpful. And as I was talking, I could see her feelings being hurt. And right in the middle of the conversation, as it was cycling into that destructive loop, I said, you know what, I am so sorry. I am doing what I just told our church not to do. I am such a hypocrite. And so I just want you to hear me. I am not preaching this series because I've mastered it, nor because I've got marriage skills. My marriage skills are flawed. I'm preaching this series because I need it just as much as many of you. Too many of us live our lives inside this destructive loop, and it doesn't have to be that way. It can be different right now, not next month, not next year, but today. And by the way, I was encouraged after last Sunday. We had a husband who took the message to heart, and he decided to drop some of the work he was doing this past week to get away for a few days to better connect with his wife. Like, it can happen that fast. Things can be better today. I checked, the sun's gonna go down about 8:22 p.m. tonight. Your marriage can be better before the sun goes down. And I believe that because I believe in a God who takes things we mess up, things we let the devil get right in the middle of. I believe God can take those things and make us new. I believe our marriages, whatever stage they're in, can always get better. The question is, how? If you're taking notes today, here's the first point I want you to write down. Marriage gets better when we use our strength for, not against, each other. Marriage gets better when we use our strengths for each other, not against each other. Now, men and women are both strong. But we're often strong in different ways, and generally speaking, men are physically stronger than women. Now, I'm not saying that every man is physically stronger than every woman. I'm not saying that there aren't women who could throw some of us men through a wall. But generally speaking, males are physically stronger than females. Just one biological example, I found this surprising but true. A man's thumb can be up to 30 times stronger than a woman's thumb. You're like, no way, look it up. They've done studies. So weird, but true. A man's thumb can be 30 times stronger than a woman's. But men, just because she cannot open a jar like you doesn't mean she's less of a person than you. And this is where men often miss the point. Like, your strength is not for your benefit, it is for her benefit. God gave you strength not to control her, but to support her. Last week we read that passage from 1 Peter chapter 3. If you'll remember at first glance, it's that uncomfortable passage about submission. But then we learned that biblical submission is not inferiority. It's not being controlled. It's not weakness. Submission is a voluntary posture of cooperation and respect. And we also learn that submission isn't just for the wives. Ephesians 5:21 says to all of us, male and female, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. But I want to go back to that 1 Peter chapter 3 text and read it today. And it's going to be our primary text for today. And this time I want to read it a little further. In verses 1 through 5 of 1 Peter chapter 3, it says this. It says, wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words. Without words, there's that phrase. That's where we got our title for the sermon series from. They may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives when they see the purity and reverence of your lives. Your beauty should come not from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of the inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's eyes. For this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to adorn themselves. Now, skipping down to verse 7, he writes, husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. The Apostle Peter, he says, husbands, treat your wives with respect as the weaker partner. Now, that does not mean that she is weaker-willed. That does not mean she is weaker-minded. That does not mean she is weaker spiritually or emotionally or relationally. Peter is talking specifically about physical strength. And most of the time, men are the stronger of the pair. And that's not just biblical, by the way. That's biological. Men typically have more testosterone, which means men naturally build bigger, stronger muscles. But what again does Peter write to the men? He says, treat your wives with respect, be considerate, be careful. Do not use your strength to hurt her. Your wife is not beneath you. She is not less than you. She is an heir with you of the gracious gift of life. Listen, it shouldn't be controversial to say men are physically stronger than women. It is controversial, but it shouldn't be. It also shouldn't be controversial to say that men and women are different. When we say such things, we're not devaluing anyone. We're sharing biblical truth and biological reality. It is part of the beauty and diversity of God's creation. To express different parts of himself, God built men and women differently. For instance, men will often greet each other with a firm handshake or a hard slap on the back or even a punch in the shoulder. But then these same men will hold back their strength when greeting a woman. Why do we do that? Because we're different. Like, I cannot imagine punching a woman in the shoulder as a greeting. Like, that would be so stupid, right? We gently shake a woman's hand. There are taller men who, without even thinking about it, will subconsciously bow as they greet a woman in order not to intimidate with their size. Now, personally, I've never had to do that one. But that's a whole nother story. But within marriage, our strength should be used to take away our wives' fears. Men, your strength should make your wife fear less. You are called to be a protective covering over her. And so when you step into the role of a Christ-like husband and she knows she's safe with you, that you would never harm her, that you would do anything to protect her, even die for her, her fears begin to alleviate. And so take the strength that God has given you and use it to support your wife, not because she's less than you. Peter says she's an equal heir with you. Look again at verse 7. Be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. She is an equal heir of God's blessings. And when you realize that, and when you use your strength to support and protect her and to treat her with respect, Peter says, God hears your prayers. Based on that last line, men, if your prayers aren't being answered, maybe you need to treat your wife better. That could be God saying, if you are treating your wife badly, then you got a problem with me too, buddy. Jesus has a bride, spiritually speaking, and it's the church. And he understands the marriage kind of love. He died for his bride, and he asks us to love our brides in the same way, to be willing to lay down our lives for our wives, just like he did. Now, generally speaking, men may be physically stronger than women, but women are often verbally stronger than men. Women are often better communicators, more conversational, better with words. In fact, studies show that women use about 30,000 words a day, while men typically use about 20,000 words a day. Words are an advantage. They are a strength for most women. And while there are laws designed to keep men from using their physical strength against their wives, as there should be, there are no laws designed to keep women from using their verbal strength against their husbands. Quick side note. There are, and this is a side note, but it's important, there are biblically defined circumstances where separation and divorce is permitted and not sinful. And those situations are adultery, abandonment, and abuse. And if you are in a marriage marked by adultery, abandonment, and abuse, I am not telling you to stick it out and try to make it better. If you are being abused or constantly cheated on, seek help and safety. That is an entirely different conversation. But in a normal marriage, and yes, I mean normal marriage, where two imperfect people are frustrating each other, normal marriage, hurting each other, misunderstanding each other, disappointing each other, God calls us to use our strengths for each other, not against each other. And just like God gave men physical strength for the benefit of their wives, God gave women verbal strength for the benefit of their husbands. Ephesians 4:29 says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Now, I gotta tell you, there are a lot of times in life when I wanna say things that are beneficial to me. when I want to say things that make me feel better in the moment. Anybody with me? Spiteful things, resentful things. I call them zingers. And sometimes I got them loaded and ready to fire. And me being a pastor, you would probably be shocked at some of the insensitive, careless, hurtful things people say to me. And I will go home after church and I will tell Janice what people said. Like I will tell on you. And then I'll tell her the zinger I had in response. And she'll say, did you really say that? And I'll say, no, I didn't say that. And she'll say, why didn't you say that? You should have said that. And I love that about her because she's offended for me. But most of the time I'll say, well, it wouldn't have helped. Wouldn't have been beneficial. Wouldn't have been worth it. Even when people use their words to tear me down, I shouldn't respond in kind. Now, sometimes I do. But that's not our way as Christ followers. As Christ followers, we build up. We do not tear down. That's our calling in marriage. And if you're not married, that's okay. That's actually our calling in life. We build up. We do not tear down. I remember the him, her equations. When a woman feels unloved, distance creates fear, and fear leads to complaining. And when a man feels disrespected, shame creates defensiveness, and defensiveness leads to withdrawal. And when a wife uses her words against her husband, it does not make him better. It makes him withdraw. And when he withdraws, she feels distance and she feels more unloved, and the destructive cycle keeps spinning. Here's a great question after last week's message. What can I do to respect my husband better? Great question. Let's make it simple. You don't have to talk about your relationship to make it better. Just build up your husband. Use your words, your strength to build him up. Which leads us to our second point, and that is marriage gets better when we consider our spouse's needs before our own. Marriage gets better when we consider our spouse's needs before our own. If your husband does 99 things that drive you crazy and one thing that's great, then you talk about the one thing that's great. Because that's what he needs from you. And I know there's a temptation to just say the things that we want to say, right? I'm just gonna say it, and if he don't like it, too bad for him. Well, actually, too bad for you. Because when you hurt your spouse, you hurt yourself. And here's what many people don't get. Marriage is a commitment to a person, not to an institution. If you are married, your commitment has an actual name, and it's your spouse's name. And I say that because there are people who won't lift a finger for their spouse, but they're not gonna get divorced because they're committed to the relationship. I made a vow, and I'm gonna keep it, come hell or high water. Okay, but if you're not committed to loving and respecting your spouse, then you're not committed to your marriage. It's not the moral high ground to say, I made a promise and I'm gonna keep it even if I don't like it. That's not real commitment. That's pride masquerading as commitment. Commitment to your marriage is commitment to your spouse's good. It's commitment to their flourishing, to their well-being, to their needs. 1 Peter chapter 3, back to our text for today, verses 8 and 9. He continues, he says, finally, all of you, and I think in our context we might say both of you. Finally, both of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing. And that is hard, especially if you're frustrated with your marriage, especially when you don't feel loved or respected. But that's still the calling. Men, do whatever is necessary to help your wife feel loved. The loneliest place for a wife is being married but feeling alone, and that's actually a very dangerous place for your wife and for your marriage. And ladies, do whatever is necessary to let him know that you are for him, not because he's perfect, but because God has called you to respect that role in your family. Now, one real practical reality I think worth noting here is just that men and women very often communicate very differently. Like women enjoy face-to-face conversations, while most men, unless they're just greeting, most men communicate shoulder to shoulder. Driving somewhere, sitting beside each other, golfing together, fishing together. Some of the best conversations men have is when nobody's staring anybody down, working alongside of each other. Try to pay attention in the next week or two how often men talk to each other side by side rather than face to face. And so if your husband says, let's take a Sunday afternoon drive together, don't assume he's avoiding a deep conversation. Is actually maybe his way of opening up the lines of communication. Which, by the way, is one more reason every couple should own a classic car. Thus saith the Lord. Pretty sure that's in the Bible somewhere. Or after church, somebody said, or a boat. Marriage gets better when we use our strengths for, not against each other. Marriage gets better when we consider our spouse's needs before our own. And marriage gets better when we stop giving the devil free rent. And I've told you this sermon series is not just for married people, it works for everyone. And this is one of those points that really drives it. Like, this works for all relationships. Marriage gets better, relationships get better, friendships get better when we stop giving the devil free rent. And some marriages and some relationships are struggling because anger has become a permanent resident. The doghouse has become someone's permanent mailing address, and every day the resentment gets stronger, and the devil loves unresolved anger and resentment. Ephesians 4:26 and 27 says, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry. And do not, in doing so, give the devil a foothold. Resentment is a satanic foothold. It is a launching pad for the devil to fire spiritual missiles that destroy relationships. Paul says, don't give the devil that opportunity. Deal with your anger, deal with your resentment, release it, surrender it to God, let it go. But remember our caveat. We're not talking about abuse. We're not talking about perpetual adultery. We're not talking about abandonment. Those situations require different conversations and different responses. But for everyday frustrations, the annoyances, the imperfections, the misunderstandings, let them go. Focus on what's good. Acknowledge the effort. Extend grace. Offer love. Give respect, and watch what God does. Because here's the bottom line. Your marriage, or any relationship really, can get better before sunset tonight if you use your strengths to build each other up. if you consider your spouse's needs before your own, and if you refuse to give the devil free rent in your relationship. Do it God's way and watch God bless what he's designed for your well-being. Let's pray. God, thank you for loving us so perfectly, for showing us love and showing us how to love generously, sacrificially, building up, not tearing down. Help us to be more like Jesus, who died for his bride, the church. May we reflect his love to one another and really to anyone and everyone. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.